Welcome, everyone. I am Benita Blessing. I'm ASECS new executive director. I came on June 6th. Nice. I've had the opportunity to work with Andrew, who's the chair of our program committee, and everyone has been very patient with me as I've tried to set up a little bit more of a centralized and transparent system. And I just want to say a couple things about why I have done that and where I see it going forward, and then how our system is supposed to work, and how it actually has worked in the past, and some things that I think going forward. And then we can answer questions about things like, how can I set up my abstract a little bit better, or if you're chairing a session, how can I help how can I best help people maybe who submit something and it's not quite right? Could I help them with that, whatever? And then I'm going to ask Andrew occasionally just to follow up, or else to jump in, please, when I get something wrong. And anyone at any time, just raise your hands, jump in if you have a question, or if I've said something wrong, especially. So the way that, and this took me a long time to understand. So the way that the system is supposed to work is it's supposed to be set up for a lot of possibility and transparency. So the idea is that we have this first round of sessions that are guaranteed sessions from our affiliates and our caucuses. And Andrew, how many guaranteed sessions do we permit per things?
I think each of the caucuses has 2 guaranteed sessions.
Okay. And then they come in, they submit them, and then after those go out, then you all see those advertised, and then you can start submitting sessions that you would like to chair. And I want to be clear that if you're chairing a session, you cannot present on that session. And that was not clear to me, and it's not clear to a lot of people given the emails that I've had over the past couple days. Right. So and then of course, if you are chairing a session, you can apply to a different session, and then you could present. And then what's happened in the past is that an individual chair, so Tekla, I'll take you as an example, would then get emails from all of from all the people interested in that. And then Tekla would decide from the 15 people who applied, which 3 or perhaps which 4 Tekla thought would be best to have for that session. And then I guess that chair was probably in charge of saying yes. Does that sound right, Andrew? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then so the communication then would go from the chair to the participants, and then ASECS would ask chairs to provide the names and affiliations and paper titles that have been selected.
And then the idea behind that was that by having panels that are round tables that are not pre-formed, it is possible to have people apply out of nowhere, unknown to the chair, and then you have this amazing number of panels and amazing number of sessions that you could then select. And it would, one of the things that ASECS is most proud of itself for, and I agree, and it's in its charter, is how interdisciplinary it is. And this was one way to really assure the interdisciplinarity. So that all sounds great. When I came on, the problem that I heard at a town hall in the spring, for those of you that may have attended, is that some people felt like they had applied year after year and never gotten in. There was some concern that some people had already pre-formed their panels and knew who they were going to be taking. There was some concern that some chairs were not waiting until the deadline and they were just taking the first 3. So if you submitted something before the deadline, but still after the first 3 had been taken, you really were wasting your time. And I don't think that this was a problem for very many panels, but I do see how that could be an issue. And one of my questions was, how will we even know? So I centralized the system this year so that whenever those papers come in, I put them into separate folders for the chairs. And if you're a chair, when you have something in that folder, then I'll notify you the first time. And then you can go back and check on a regular basis. Usually if a paper comes in, I just go ahead and reshare it with you and say, oh, there's something else in your paper. So the chairs are still all in charge. You all get to decide whatever you want to be doing. I don't care. But what I do care about is information. I'd like to be able to see, gosh, Andrew has applied 15 years in a row and no one has ever taken him. How can I help get Andrew on a panel maybe that would be better suited for his. So that gives you some data. One of the other things is that when I'm looking at writing some grants for our organization, and I'm often, some of those questions are things like, what is your acceptance rate? And we don't know. We have no idea, because it could be that 25 people apply for each panel. It could be that 3 people apply for each panel. I do know it's the case that sometimes you have to kind of scramble and get people to apply. So this is going to give me some of that information. The other part is that I'm hopeful that if we have a lot of things coming in for a panel, of course, we could look at setting up 2 panels for some of those sessions if they're really popular and if you have really great applications. But what if you just have some great applications and they just don't quite fit with what you're doing? Since I'll be able to see, oh, there's lots of things coming in there, let me take a look at those. And then if you as chairs decide not to take something, I can see, is there a way that I can move this person, Mario, over to Cheda's panel that I kind of need something and that actually would be a good fit. So one of the things that I'm concerned about with chairs taking all those emails is that I don't know about you all, but it's really hard to stay on top of emails. I think lately, especially since the pandemic, our email boxes are just overflowing. And I worry about emails getting lost and forgetting to email somebody something. And this way it's all me. I can, if I don't email somebody, then we have somebody to blame. But if it's all coming in centrally, we can definitely see that way what's happening. And what I probably will suggest that you all do is when you do accept your people, that you can send the acceptances and I'll send out the bad news. I think that might be also nicer for people as well. So what have I missed? Andrew, you want to take over?
I think you've covered it. So the really important takeaway is that the chairs themselves can still make all the decisions about who will be on their panel, and this is really just about the kind of like oversight for transparency purposes. And then when we inevitably have panels and sessions that have low application rates for some reason, like maybe 1 or 2 papers have been presented to the chair. And they still need like 1 or 2 more to actually make it happen, then this is also a way to kind of help to resolve that. And I think that's a really big plus. It saves the other communication of, does anybody have any panels that are low enrolled, and then constant like messages to the membership saying these panels need more applications. So in the end, it'll cut down, I think, on a lot of extraneous communication also.
Yeah, and since I'll be able to see what's coming in as it's coming in, then I'll be able to do that as we're going instead of waiting until the very end and say, okay. So maybe we can open it up for questions. What kind of questions do people have? For those of you, I guess I do want to maybe mention that when you're discussing with people how to apply, one of the things you might ask them to do is really be specific about not only what their project is, but also maybe what it brings to the table for your particular panel. I think making sure that if you're someone who's presenting an abstract for the first time, that you really say, this is what this presentation does, and this is why it's perfect for this panel, and why this panel is perfect for me. I think that helps the chair really think about, I can see how this could be in dialogue with other papers. So that's,
I'd actually asked people for drafts of papers by a certain date, like pretty close to the conference time, so that I wasn't like putting undue pressure on them, but just so that I can read more or less what they plan on presenting in advance, and I can begin to think about how they relate and questions to ask, and be more of a respondent kind of person in the process.
That is a great point, Andrew. I did not know if we had a policy about that. We should.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for this great session. So I am chairing a panel, and I guess I'm just not quite sure how much advice I'm allowed to give people before they submit their abstract. I think it's great to give the general advice on the format and structure, but am I allowed to maybe even suggest specific
Yeah.
ideas? Or
I mean, I
pieces
think
of
that's really a
music
nice
that they-
question. I think it's gonna be the worst answer ever. It's gonna be, it depends. And I think that I trust my ASECS colleagues to make that call. I think if someone's writing you and saying, I'm interested in your panel, but I'm not really sure what to do, then and then, you know, writing back and saying, here are a couple of ideas that I could imagine being that something like that work for you. I think working with someone on what might be an interesting piece would be great. I mean, I think the thing that I would definitely give somebody feedback on is if they applied with something and it really is just too far outside of what you can imagine getting any other. I mean, one thing if they all apply for something really far outside, but then they would all work together. But if you have something come in that's a really strong paper, but you just like, you know what, this would need a little bit of work to really make it work on this panel. And if you're serious about wanting to be on this panel, can I ask you to think about these pieces? I do think that the point of getting in papers before the, you know, a little bit before to give the chair a chance to look over them and say a couple words about them is really smart. What do people think about that? What would be reasonable, remembering that none of us, or very few of us, get things done really early, and it's not going to be an easy it's not going to be an easy next semester for anybody, I don't think either.
Helpful. So my experience was that I was successful in submitting a session proposal. But I remember, and that I wanted to ask, and sorry, is there a way at least we can receive a no, sorry, like it doesn't fit?
Yes. Yeah. So are you asking if you don't get accepted to a session that somebody would tell you you're not accepted? Yes, Elisa, what I will ask is for chairs to give out the yes, you're in email, and then verify that with me. And then I'll write people that are not in. And then also I'll be able to, I'll also write them. And if I have any other ideas for them, then we can do that as well.
But as a very early member of the ASECS, and also, you know, a foreign member and a young member, it can be a bit intimidating to apply for a session and maybe having the feeling that it's all set.
It's nice to have, I had heard somebody else, a couple other people say that they worried about that as well. You didn't know, we'll work on that for next year. But it is my impression, having talked with people, Elisa, that most chairs really are just excited to get new work. And I do think it's the point that we really want to be encouraging new interdisciplinary work from emerging scholars is important, as well as new voices from people outside the field, you know, so who don't normally come in. So you know, political philosophers, we have a few of those, it looks like, in a membership. It's maybe some more in those areas, geographers, right? So I think making sure that we are really excited about welcoming new members, as we also can, you know, continue to receive support, to offer support from our established members as well, I think is going to be really quite important. One thing that you know, I do actually think that it's probably helpful to position yourself when you're applying for something, thinking about, you know, I mean, they can see your CV or your bio or whatever, but still, I think, you know, this is a new project for me, or I'm, you know, this is my first time to ASECS. It just helps people get a sense of who you are and where you are. And that goes back to Tekla's question of like, what would a chair be allowed to say to somebody? You know, if I had a graduate student or a recent PhD, I would feel much more comfortable saying, you've got a great project here, but I'm having a hard time seeing where it fits in this panel. Why don't you apply to this other panel that I saw that looks really great? Or even let's see how we could tighten this up a little bit, you know, or, you know, really even like, I don't see a place for this year, but maybe next year, we should do something, co-chair a session or something. I think that would be some feedback that I think would be really appropriate. Weren't for people. It's only 3 or 4 places, and if you've got 7 people, someone's not going to make it. So I will try really and follow up with those people that are not accepted for whatever reason, and think about where can we find, do we have places for them anyway that we could find places for? Or what else can we do to make sure that they feel welcome, that you all feel welcome at the conference?
I had
and that's
another
something also that-
concern last year, which might be helpful to share. So I was strongly encouraged to propose a session, and that was absolutely great. But at a certain point, also due to the COVID issue, we were afraid that we couldn't fill the session and that it was going to be canceled. And I remember people having like they wrote a note saying, okay, I'm applying for your session, also for another session. So I was afraid of rejecting something and then that someone else could switch to another session. So until the end, there was a little bit of uncertainty about that. And I had at least 3 people that applied for multiple sessions and their papers were good. So I really wanted in, and I was rejecting other people. So at the end, I had no idea of the final number. So
yeah, that's a great question. I think in that case, if I would encourage chairs to also let me know that somebody has applied. I mean, I should be able to see that happening, but I might not catch them all if they apply at different times, to let me know. And then I can, if you like, I can also provide guidance. So, you know, at least I can imagine that if you had low numbers for your session and somebody else had a lot, you know, if it was techless, then I could say, you know, somebody's applied to both of your, you know, your sessions, and technically, so you know, the other session is a little bit lower enrolled, and what are the, you know, what is your instinct here? And if Tekla says, I have to have this paper, it's the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life, and at least that's information for you. And if Tekla says instead, well, you know, there's 2 equally strong papers and I'm trying to decide between the 2 of them, if this one has a place, then I think we could, Andrew, does that sound like something that we would feel comfortable doing in ASECS culture?
Yeah, I think that that's a good way to sort of handle it. And what I was going to say is that it's possible that people won't tell you also that they've applied to other sessions too. So the possibility of losing somebody to another session is still kind of like always there, or that somebody just won't get the funding to actually come or whatever. So things always happen from the chair's point of view. And when I was moving from being a grad student to a faculty member a bunch of years ago, I applied, I think, to like five different sessions, and all of them were accepted. And then I was like, oh, so now like I had to like figure out which one was the one that I wanted to do, and then communicate to the other one that I wasn't going to be able to do it. And I felt like a moron in that situation, but I didn't know any better. But you know, so I think people might not, or maybe should be advised maybe to do that less than they maybe do, because it just sometimes can backfire on you.
We do ask people to not apply to more than 2, and we do ask them to tell both chairs, but still that could get forgotten or the chair might not notice. And Andrew, thank you so much for your point about something happening and actually you don't get funding, so the panel, you know, might be in danger. You know, maybe we could think about having, you know, a deep bench of people that, you know, would you consider being put on a wait list, you know, and then if by a certain time we would let you know. I mean, would that be something that people would be?
Yeah, and I think in my previous experiences chairing panels before, where the communication came directly to the panel chair, that was sort of something that I kind of did by default, where I had like the people I wanted for sure, and then the several strong papers in addition, sort of in reserve, and I didn't communicate to them that it was yes or no. They were just sort of like kept in alert a little bit until I could finally say, you know, yes or no to the waitlist folks. That's not the like most elegant way to handle it, certainly, and I'm sure that there are people, and I you know, I sympathize. There are people who are like waiting, wanting to know whether they're going to come or not, but that was the only way really to fundamentally handle it. But I think with this system, maybe where it's more centralized, there might be some other way to like have a formal wait list, or at least, you know, notify somebody and say, you know, paper is really strong, and you may well, if somebody drops out, you may well be the next person in line. I don't know if that would communicate from the chair or from Benita.
Well, I'm willing to write all the emails. I don't want to, if chairs want to write those emails, that's great. If you'd rather have it come from me, so that if somebody has a complaint, it comes to, I mean, I get paid to take the complaints and you all don't, you're all volunteers. So, you can send me compliments as well, just for the record. I get paid for those. But if I'm more than happy to write that letter. And I think maybe Andrew, you and I could work on what would be a, by this time date that you would definitely know. Cause I mean, at some point, like if you're being asked 3 days before the conference, after all, you're not going to be able to get a plane ticket or whatever, things like that. But I think maybe having, let the chair know by which point, we can have a cutoff. We assume you're coming. And then after that, maybe have us, if you have people that are on standby or a wait list, then we'll let you know by that. And I think also, if we let people who are the first round people know first, and then I can go ahead and follow up with anybody else and say, at this moment, we've asked those people that first round, right? And then I can, and then, either you people are on a wait list, and then if you will hang out for the couple weeks, that's great. And then the other group that those papers are not appropriate for this particular session, this particular year, I can then just say that, no, sorry, and look at other things.
Right. One of the nice things about having the communication come directly through the chair in the past was when people would come and say, I really like your panel. I'm working on this big topic and I can pull out like 3 possible papers for your panel. Which sort of topic would you prefer? And you can sort of work with them on that level. That was always nice, because then you can kind of, it goes back to like giving them feedback about what they're proposing and having it better fit your panel. And it worked really well. It was usually like a really ambitious graduate student or a new faculty member who just had like a ton of stuff that they wanted to get out. And they were just having trouble deciding because it was all pressing and in the works for them. I'm wondering if there's a way that this new system could sort of have that happen, where the chairs maybe look and initiate that kind of conversation. So again, going back to that question about feedback, that might be a way to justify it, like to go back to the person who you feel is quite strong, but maybe you want to narrow them or steer them in a slightly different direction, and they may well be open to it, especially I think if they're at that career stage.
But what you're making me think, Andrew, is that we could do a list of tips that we could send around. These are things that you should feel comfortable doing. You don't have to, but if you'd like to, and then these are the things that we'd ask you not to do. Like, please do make sure that you wait up until the deadline to accept everybody and take everybody gets an equal, glance. Consideration. Okay, so things to do and feel comfortable doing to support your colleagues. Thanks. What other kinds of things do people have as suggestions or questions, comments, things that worked really well for you in the past?
I just think this is great, and I don't mind receiving as many reminders, tips as possible, because we easily forget. So I like frequent reminders about like deadlines and things to do. Okay. So thanks for that.
Yeah, I don't want to ever clog anybody's email inboxes too much, but I'm also the same way, that I need more reminders rather than fewer. So I'll try to not overwhelm people, but also remind when deadlines are coming up, and don't forget you've got this many days left, and don't forget you're about to get a whole bunch of applications near the deadline. This is a really small thing that I'm working on, but I do now have a calendar set up. It's not very well built out, but I just want to show everybody where it is. So if you go under more, it has an events and deadline calendar. And so I have drop-in hours as well. I'm going to start having kind of office hours, drop-in hours twice a month. My first ones are coming up. And I'm going to put everything red for ASECS related things. And then I'll start putting, so here's the deadline for everyone for this. And then I'll start putting other kinds of events on there from other affiliate associations that might be interesting. So we will have a new website if it's the last thing I do by the time of the conference, and it'll be a little bit easier to manipulate. But this way you at least have something that you can go and look on the calendar as well. And you can actually download those events to your own calendars too.
I love the detail. I think it's great to be getting all of this informative communication. So thank you.
Of course, Andrew pointed out that I got the year wrong for today's thing. So 2023, and I forgot to write 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And like 3 different people looked at that, but I'll try to be careful about that. I can maybe talk a little bit about, I mean, no one's asking this question, but I keep thinking you're going to ask it, are there going to be any virtual options for the conference this year? And the answer is, I don't know. I wrote in, or we wrote in the board statement about St. Louis and our statement about going to St. Louis post Roe v. Wade, and why we are committed to going, and why money is actually not the key factor. I wrote in there that we are exploring virtual options, and I was careful to only write exploring because we don't know yet. We do not have internet in our contract for the hotel yet. And I'm not sure what is going to be possible. So when we even talk about things like hybridity or at whatever level, even somebody zooming in on their laptop or whatever, I don't know what's going to be an option. I won't know that for a little while. So I just don't know. And hotels are still understaffed. I will be flying out with our conference events coordinator, Devin Bender. Some of you might remember her from last year. We're going to meet in St. Louis in October. And I'll have a site visit and I can see what the rooms look like, what some of our options are going to be. The question of accessibility is one that's so important. And I think that one of the things that we have talked about in the pandemic that a lot of disability studies advocates have feared is coming true in some areas, that we made things really accessible and then we decided not to anymore. And I don't have a magic wand for how that's going to work this very first year that I'm running the conference. But I can come up with some imperfect solutions, and then we can think about what we're going to be doing going forward. The year after this, we're going to be in Toronto. That's an international conference. It's going to be another interesting challenge. Toronto's a lovely city, so it'll all be worth it. And the year after that is going to be virtual. So one of the things I'd like to be doing now is getting ASECS on a regular schedule of robust virtual offerings throughout the year so that we are practicing our best virtual selves and have some opportunities to think about what that would look like for a true virtual conference down the line. If anybody has any feedback or suggestions or comments, I would love to hear those either now in the chat or come on into the, just unmute and talk to me or send me an email. It's not an easy piece to figure out. One of the things last year that we definitely needed in that hotel was microphones. Those ceilings were really, really high. It was hard to even hear in some of the rooms if you were in the front row. Microphones cost money, everything costs money. That's something that we need to be thinking about. How do we allocate the resources that we most need? And I won't know, like I said, a lot of those things until I see the hotel, but I am attentive to them, and they do matter to me. I've run.
I've always kind of wondered. I've been to other conferences that are pretty much on the scale of ASECS, where they're hosted at a university on a campus, and accommodations are either on or off campus. That doesn't really matter, but the events itself take place on campus and campus buildings. And what's like in terms of internet, the nice thing about that is that usually that's already there, and it may or may not be an add-on to whatever contract is signed. I'm wondering, if in future years, if that would be a possibility to avoid it being an add-on expense and allow for hybridity to be more possible.
I think it's a great idea. And I'd also even like to think about, I don't know what partnering with public schools in the area as well. I think some of those in some communities that might be a possibility. The question is the timing. It's easier to be on campus at most universities for a conference if it's the summertime. It doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, this is really early days to be thinking about this. But one thing I've thought for future conferences is, especially if you had a campus that was quite nearby, right? If it's like 15 miles away, then that's not so helpful. If it's across town. But if you've got something that's within walking distance, or that you could arrange public transportation for, that you could have a Saturday session perhaps, and some classrooms, that would be one way to do that. Yeah, I think that, and that's going to be, we have a local arrangements committee this year that has their hands full, but we do have a local arrangements committee, and we're going to have one going forward. And then especially for the years after this one, I'll be asking them to help me investigate those kinds of options. Like when GSA, the German Studies Association, when we were in Portland in 2019, we were short a couple rooms at the last minute. And because I was faculty at Oregon State University, I happened to know that we had a Portland campus, and it was just down the road from the hotel. It was a block, or 2 blocks. And I was able to get us rooms there. It was supposed to be at a discounted rate, and in the end, I don't even think they charged us anything, since I was faculty there. And they had everything set up with all those. It was an amazing setup. Now, that wouldn't be for an entire conference. It had several rooms, and not enough, for all the breakout rooms that we have. But those kinds of solutions, I think, would work. Something that's, thinking about what's possible on the weekends. And of course, ASECS doesn't do Sunday things, so that's a day out of available space in campuses. But Saturday, absolutely. And I think this is something we can talk about going forward for where we want conferences, what kinds of cities make the most sense. I mean, we all want to be in the coolest cities, right? But they're expensive, and less expensive ones don't always have aren't as easy to get to, maybe. So, and that maybe, that like the great sort of, having something in a suburb of some place is a lot cheaper, but then it doesn't have all of the amenities of being able to walk, just downtown to something nice. So, yeah. Elisa, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I have a question, even if it's not strictly related to this conference, just a curiosity, as the next conference, like International Conference for 18th Century Studies, will be in Rome. I wonder if there is anything planned in terms of ASECS representation, a sort of, I don't know, even a gathering of people that will be there, a session, because I know some members, and I'm also participating in Rome. Even if I'm a member of the Italian Society for 18th Century Studies, I was asked to participate or to create a panel with ASECS members, which is nice and a bit strange at the same time, but I'm happy it's happening. So I just wondering if there is any way we can promote also the events that are happening in ASECS on that occasion, or to create a connection, or, I don't know if there is something going on.
That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for it yet. I just wrote that on my to-do list is like several pages long now. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, I think that what you're suggesting is an amazing idea, and I'll get back to you on that. I'll get back to everybody on that. It is helpful to know that you're going to be there, for sure, because I think having some contacts in the area will be really...
I'm happy to help if I can organize a sort of get together or something to represent the ASECS at the ASECS in Rome.
Yeah, absolutely. I just put you down then, is going to do all the work. I hope that's okay.
That's fine.
We'll take care. Great. Well, we're coming up on the hour, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I'll hang out here for a little bit. If anybody has any questions, I'll turn off the recording, and then if anyone wants to hang out and be off recording and talk with me, I'm more than happy to. And otherwise, I will wish everyone a fantastic day. Thank you so much for coming, and do feel free always to email me with any suggestions or comments. And I really am just a Zoom call away. I'm in the study or in my garden sometimes when it's nice outside, in front of my computer most days of the week. And I often can even get on a last-minute call if you have any questions. I do want to remind you that on the 21st of September, that is a Wednesday, again, it'll be this time, 8:00 a.m. Pacific time, 11 o'clock Eastern time. I'll have drop-in hours. I don't have any agenda for that. I'm just gonna be around, and I'll have those a couple times a month if you wanna just drop in and talk. And if we need to have those dedicated with certain topics that people are really interested in, we can do that as well. I will post this recording of the session. Yes, thank you.